Hello and welcome to Virtual Investor Conferences. My name is Bob Power, and on behalf of OTC Markets, we're very pleased you've joined us for our next live presentation from Lithium Ionic Corporation, a Canadian mining company exploring and developing its lithium properties in Brazil. Please note you can submit questions in the box to the left of the slides. You can also view a company's availability for one-on-one meetings through the Schedule Meetings tab found on the conference platform. At this point, I'm very pleased to welcome Blake Highlands, Chief Executive Officer of Lithium Ionic Corporation, which trades on the OTCQB venture market under the symbol LTHCF and on the TSXV under the symbol LTH. Welcome, Blake.
Very much, Bob. Thanks for having me here, and welcome everybody who's listening. Looking forward to telling the story. So, Lithium Ionic, as Bob mentioned, is a Canadian-based or domiciled company with a Brazilian asset in the state of Minas Gerais. It is a hard rock spodumene-focused lithium project, and I'm looking forward to going through it over the next 20 minutes or so. So, as I mentioned, the asset's located in Minas Gerais state in Brazil, which, quite honestly, as far as a jurisdiction goes, I would consider Minas Gerais a tier one mining jurisdiction as far as moving projects forward, permitting, knowledge base, and certainly for quality of asset. And when you look at Minas Gerais and what's becoming the Lithium Valley in these Brazilian pegmatite belt, we are certainly seeing some of the highest quality coarse grain spodumene in the world, and a new hard rock lithium district is beginning to develop there as well. That, in my personal opinion, has the opportunity or the potential to grow and scale and opportunity skies in line with the Pilgangroos and the green bushes of the world of Western Australia, and certainly that's what we expect to see over the coming years. We have a maiden resource out now. Approximately 20 million tons of material of indicated and inferred. It's running about 1.4% Li2O, and that is primarily from spodumene, very low in deleterious material. It's really kind of the ideal coarse grain material that you would look for in a potential DMS production scenario, and that ultimately is part of our plan going forward. That being said, that resource is probably already getting to the point where we are, almost ready to call it out of date. We'll have an updated resource later this year. We're looking at Q3, hoping to put out a PA around kind of a phase one approach for a production scenario that would have us do over 200,000 tons of concentrate per annum. And in putting out that PA, we'd like to update that resource as well, and we certainly expect to double what we put out a couple months ago. And it speaks to the quality of the area, the deposit type, the team that we have on the ground, how quickly we can move things forward. And on that team, and we have a proven Brazilian team led by Helio Diniz, and I'll touch on him as well, Carlos Costa, VP of Exploration. And really, although this is a venture-listed company and we have an over-the-counter listing, I'm based in Canada, in Toronto, myself, the CFO, a couple other employees, but really the company is Brazilian based primarily. We have an office in Belo and certainly, of course, in the Araçuaí area and Salinas area, we focus our energy and efforts. And really, most of the spend and work goes into the ground, of course. And I'm based where I am to be able to come out to things like this and be able to tell the story. So. Near-term catalysts, I already touched on a few, but certainly we expect to advance engineering this year, PA, and through the end of the year and to start next year, we think we'll be in a place to put out a full feasibility, which we already started in May of this year. We have that updated resource coming, I mentioned, and that PEA, Q3 of this year. And along with that, we expect to be submitting our permits, our construction license permits, which we have multiple. We're looking at a small-scale permit, about a 50,000 ton concentrate scenario that we're looking to submit for in September, October, and also for a larger scale, 200,000+ ton, 250,000 ton project, which we expect to put in the permit request for in that September-October range as well. And one of the beautiful things about Minas Gerais State is the process is known. The expectation timeline for permits is quick. It is a significant differentiating feature from our peer group. There are good assets globally in other parts of the world, including here in Canada, but certainly the permit timelines are nowhere near as quick. So when we look at our asset, how if I had to describe it, it's world-class geology, world-class district and opportunity. It has scale and growth opportunity as well as unbeatable permit timelines. So we think we're pushing forward for a world-class project, and we want to catch this current lithium cycle. Touch a little bit on our structure. About 140 million shares outstanding. We just raised capital last month. We raised $28 million. I think 96% of the book was institutionally bought. So some of these numbers in that top right pie chart there will shift, but at the same time, we like to maintain a certain level of retail in the name as well, to continue to have the kind of liquidity and volume that we certainly look for to be able to drive interest and drive buying in the name. Market cap right around 300 million Canadian. I think we're trading around $2.50 Canadian today. We went public in May of last year at 70 cents. So in about a year and a half, we've had good success, good growth from a company that went public, made a discovery, ultimately discovered our Bandera showing mid last year through drilling and the opportunity that it presented. Have gone all the way now through a resource, pushing into engineering, into permitting, and we expect to have permit back next year and start moving towards construction and production by 2025. That's extremely quick, and again, one of the big differentiating features for us. About $30 million at the bank, so we're well funded, and I already mentioned where we sit as far as market cap. Myself and the team, technically based, strong background in geology for us. Myself, Helio Diniz, Carlos Costa, and members of the board are geologists by background. Myself, sort of primarily focused in precious metals and gold previously, pardon me. And I spent the last sort of 4 or 5 years on a project in Quebec called Troilus Gold, where we've raised over $200 million, and we're able to take that former producing asset from roughly 1 million inherited ounces to what I think will exceed over 10 million ounces in the next year or so. So very, very proud of that project. But I'd like to focus on Helio Diniz in this one, and Carlos. Both of them have over 40 years of experience in Brazil and Minas Gerais, responsible for multiple large-scale discoveries, and are well-versed in how to take projects from grassroots through to permitting, development, construction, and obviously operations. So Helio running South American exploration for Falconbridge and Noranda, and ultimately into Xstrata before moving on to grow his team and continually pick up interesting properties and discoveries, both in precious metals, base metals, and the aggregate space, in the ag space, agricultural space, I should say. So very, very proud of our team and what they've accomplished so far. And I think we're going to continue to see success in large part due to their current abilities. Talked about Minas Gerais a lot already, but like I said, I think it's a tier 1 jurisdiction as far as moving projects forward. And in particular, the area we're in, the Araçuaí and Salinas area of Minas Gerais, this is an area that is welcoming this kind of work. They are welcoming and excited about the prospect of projects like Sigma Lithium, our next door neighbor, ourselves, Latin Resources, and now Atlas to the south. They're excited about these type of projects coming online and the economic growth that presents to these communities. And with these communities, I mean, Araçuaí is a 40,000 person community. There's paved roads all the way to site. We're about 20 minutes from town. Hydroelectric power. The state is looking at upgrading a rail line that could service the port. It was shut down in the 80s, but it would be a great opportunity to bring that back online, and again, growing the infrastructure that's already in place to help us and everybody in this belt as this becomes one of the largest producers of hard rock lithium in the world. And from a state permitting perspective, extremely favorable and some of the things that certainly have seen projects slow down for permit timelines in Brazil are focused around deforestation and First Nations issues, which slow down community consultation. So we don't have those issues. We're nowhere near the Amazon, and we don't currently have any First Nations issues to consider. We don't have First Nations to work with. So very much the ideal location for getting projects moving forward. And that was evident by how quickly Sigma Lithium, next door to us, who's a $5 billion company now, were able to move very, very quickly. We expect to do the same. I've talked about this a little already. On the left part of this image, you can see the Lithium Valley, or the belt, the East Brazilian pegmatite belt. And we obviously fall within that. I mean, this is one of the most important pegmatite belts in the world already. It produces almost all the world's semi-precious gemstones, things like amethyst and rose quartz, things of those nature, epidote, etc. So we and tourmaline crystals, etc. You know, the size of your body. It's one of the most interesting mineral forming locations in the world, and these pegmatites have been exploited and explored for many, many years. And of course, more recently, we're seeing spodumene crystals and mineralization be a focus in this area. So two key areas within it that are our focus are the Itinga project area, which is where our current resource comes from, and our newer Salinas project area, which is very close to Latin Resources. If anybody knows them, they're about between $600 and $800 million company right now, and we have extensions of very much the same deposits they're seeing where they are. So I won't break down the resource too much, but this is zooming in on the Itinga area. One of the key areas for us to focus in on is Bandeira. Bandeira is actually sandwiched between a 30-year hard rock lithium producer in a privately owned Brazilian family-run company called CBL. CBL was producing for 30 years for ceramics in Greece. They actually have an in-country hydroxide and carbonate plant as well as small scale. Always operated sort of 8,000 to 10,000 tons of concentrate per annum. Now they're up on about 36,000 to 40,000 tons of concentrate per annum, and they're looking to grow. And they're right next door to us, and we can see them from our property, very much in the same trend of pegmatites. And to the south, directly to the south of us, are the Barreiro NDC deposits of Sigma, so over 60 million tons of 1.5% lithium just to the south of us. So obviously a key area, and almost all of, except for about, I think 15 to 16 million tons of the material that we put out in the resource came from the Bandeira area. And that, of course, has grown significantly since we put our resource out, and we're looking forward to updating Bandeira. And then there's an area we call Galvani in this map. It's the Ultralato showing, and that represents about 3 to 5 million tons of material as well. But this is a key area where we think a lot of the large-scale 200,000 ton plus production of concentrate could come from. And again, I mean, it's hard to find a better area. Shusha, just to the north of us, is where Sigma started their operation, and just to the south, so much potential in this belt that we haven't even touched yet. This area alone, we believe, will be hundreds of millions of tons of material. I lost that there. Okay, wait. Sorry. There we go. Just an example of some of the grade and drill results that we typically see from Bandeira and Ultralato. You can see very wide, thick intercepts of these sort of swarmed pegmatite vein sets. Very high grade for spodumene as well, extremely clean, very low in things like amblygonite, petalite, lepidolite, these other sort of lithium-bearing but more difficult minerals. We're really focused on large-scale, coarse-grain spodumene crystals. We have spodumene crystals in our showings that are, from the ground up past my waist. So pretty beautiful mineral formations. A better look even from what I was just talking about, Sigma's location, their Barreiro and NDC, you can see just to the south of Bandeira, and CBL's operation just to the north. So proof of concept all around us is really important. It's worth nailing down. And we focused our work primarily on Bandeira and Ultralato. We just put out a couple of interesting drill results from Itira that you see on the west of this image, the left side of this image. And we've just started scraping the surface on what we expect to find in this area. So between ourselves and Sigma Lithium on this page that you're looking at right now, there's already defined over 120 million tons of material here. But we're just scraping the surface on the opportunity. I like to show this one. You can see how close CBL's operation is to ours. It's an underground operation. CBL's been running for 30 years. I also like to show this one because you can see where there is no major deforestation issues. It's kind of scrub brush. It's kind of, there's no major altitude issues or relief issues. It's really kind of the perfect area for mining, both open pit or underground. And it's certainly, you can see why this is not, deforestation of the Amazon. And like I said earlier, we're not dealing with First Nations issues as well. A little bit, I won't spend too much time on sections or plan views, but I guess ultimately what I do like to talk about here, because I am a geologist by background, and how we're able to grow resources so quickly, and everybody is in this belt, is that once you get onto the pegmatite trends, which you use soil anomalies to discover, they're late intrusion. So they come in later, they fill in fractures that already exist, and so they're not complicated, difficult kind of orogenic gold type systems or difficult discrete gold systems. The grade, the homogeneity of grade is spectacular. If you look at Latin's grade, it's 1.4, Sigma's 1.4, ours is 1.4. The homogeneity of grade is like nothing I've ever seen before. But very high grade, very high quality, spodumene contained in sort of vertical and then horizontal cutting sills that ultimately connect all these zones. But as you drill them, you define them very quickly, and the rock, of course, is worth a lot. Another example of how these things serve anastomos. They work like the veins in your hands. They sort of spread out, and that style of formation is typical from these spodumene-rich pegmatites, and they are unique, and it's kind of actually the ideal environment for high-grade, high-quality spodumene-rich pegmatites. So you get multiple zones in these drill holes, and the truth is that, it sounds promotional, but the more you drill, the deeper you drill, the more you find. Simplification of kind of looking at a drill hole. Either you're in the pegmatite or you're not. It's very simple. If you're in the black, you're in the schist host rock around you, and if you're in the white, you're in the pegmatite. And the spodumene in this area, if you were in parts of northern Canada and you were looking for spodumene in pegmatites, you might use a hand lens, try to zoom in and see as close as you can, very fine grain, millimeter scale mineralization. Here we get very, very large scale crystals. In fact, I actually have one here. You can see, a spodumene crystal like this is not uncommon to find inside drill core. So very visually obvious when you have the main zone or you don't. So it's pretty spectacular. Looking up into the Salinas area, very, very interesting. This is coming off of the Kalina deposit, which is where Chris Gill and his team at Latin Resources have outlined a pretty significant deposit of over 45 million tons. We have the extensions of that Kalina deposit coming into the northeast, as well as multiple other interesting pegmatite showings in the area. You can see in the image, kind of in the top middle, a really beautiful pegmatite with beautiful white spodumene crystals showing. Again, you can see the scale of these things compared to the hammer on there. We're seeing that there. We're starting our exploration, and there certainly will be a portion of this included in our resource coming out in Q3 of this year. We're really optimistic about being able to define significant resources here and create a lot of value even away from our Bandera deposits. So this is an area that we expect to continue to develop, and this is just one small showing. Again, we're just scraping the surface of Salinas as well, but certainly been something that it's taken a lot of our resources and time, because it's almost like running two projects at once. But we believe that we can grow a huge opportunity here as well. So you could take Bandera and the value you could create there, and you could double that by doing something in Salinas. I would say this is an area that we get absolutely no value in the stock now, but could be a major catalyst as we start to put out some of the resource numbers and scale this year. Initial metallurgy is exactly what we were expecting, and it's going to continue to be that way. We are in the same rocks that CBL has been in for 30 years, what Sigma has outlined in their advanced metallurgical test work, and what other people will find in these things as well. 60-ish around % from DMS recoveries, which is very good. DMS plants are very cheap to build, very quick to build as well. I think if you look at the capex of a project like Sigma, I think they were around 130 to 150 million dollars to build their project. Extremely cheap. I'll walk through some of the economics on them. Full flotation takes you to about 80%, but almost everybody in this belt will start DMS just because it's cheap, it's simple, and ultimately you don't need to use any chemical processing in that. But eventually we could look at adding flotation in the area as well, done in a safe way, of course. So I like to touch on this. I don't like giving a Sigma presentation, but we've always maintained this one because part of the reason we put out our 20 million ton, 1.4% resource, of indicated and inferred was because there was a phase one of Sigma's project that we really liked. It was the Shusha portion. It was the first stage of their development. They were looking to get to 270,000 tons of production, about 1 to 1.5 million tons ROM. That was going to be about 130 million to build. It was going to have a post-tax NPV of about just shy of $2 billion US, and that was using a heavily discounted spodumene price of about $1,900 a ton of spodumene. Spodumene currently trades for about $4,000 a ton, so less than half of where it currently trades. You still see a project with a roughly $2 billion post-tax NPV, and I think they're looking at post-tax IRRs of 300 to 500%, something like that, on a project like this, and payback periods of 4 or 5 months. The amount of rock you need to move is not a lot. The scale of the projects are not huge, but the economics are fantastic. And so when we looked at putting out our initial resource, we wanted something scaled like phase one of Sigma's project in Shusha. That's what we're doing. That's what we're engineering. That's what we're going to permit. And again, we're going to grow our resource to show how we scale that up, just like they did as well. You go to a phase two where you get to 400 or 500,000 tons of concentrate, and you start to become a world-class scale project that ultimately can feed a lot of the lithium concentrate necessary for the market to ultimately produce the downstream LCE. So we like to show this one in particular, just because as a 250 to 300 million dollar Canadian company, we're not far from looking at a project that could easily turn around an NPV of nearly $2 billion US. These are a lot of the catalysts I've already talked about along the way, but I do like to talk about, we started with 1,300 hectares. We're now over 14,000 hectares. I credit a Brazilian team that knows how to get projects picked up, that know how to do business in the area. We certainly are moving as quickly as we possibly can to get to a production scenario. And we fully expect to be producing from this deposit in 2025. We fully expect to have a construction license next year in 2024. So we're going to look at how we are going to finance those things, whether we're going to bring on strategic partners, what kind of capital we're going to need to bring on. But again, very low cost, high rate of return, and excellent project economics on these things. So we're working with multiple potential partners to look at completely de-risking the project over the next 12 months. Last bit I'll touch on before I get to some of these questions, I think. So the Minas Gerais state, recently we signed an MOU with them, their economic arm, Department of Economics for the state. Elio is in this photo here. He's in the black suit and the white shirt there. We were able to meet with them and sign off on an MOU that essentially prioritizes this type of project. We look at the area of Ersoy, Salinas. Minas Gerais looks at these areas as a place that hasn't necessarily benefited from the history of mining like a lot of the state has. This is an area of focus that could bring prosperity to an area that could certainly use it. And of course, this is an initiative that moves to a global plan of zero emission. And ultimately, I think that Minas Gerais is doing a great job of focusing their energies and efforts into the Lithium Valley, because there's a global push for this material, of course, and the undersupply of lithium into the supply chain cycle. So amazing to actually sit down and have a government that wants to support our projects and move things forward as quickly as possible. Ultimately, I think that's it. I mean, we have an emerging high-grade, high-quality, world-class geological domain with extraordinary economics in the right cycle at the right time. We have a belt that's emerging as the next Western Australia, and that there are no other massive hard rock, large-scale belts like this in the world. We're going to move towards engineering and permitting. We're going to put out resources that we think will be more than double what we already have now. We have roughly $30 million cash in the bank, and we're well positioned to see a massive re-rate in the stock, and we're looking forward to a really exciting next 12 to 18 months. That's certainly it, and how you can get in contact with me. Let me try to pick through some of these questions and see what I can work through. One of the questions here is, will you be making 2 processing sites, one for Itinga and one for Salinas, or just one for both? It's early to say, but I would think we would do 2. Given the project economics and the distance apart, it probably makes sense to do separate projects. I think in the end it would be less strain on infrastructure, and probably makes a lot more sense from a rock moving exercise. It would just be easier to have that. Plus, we'll see where our neighbors and what the full scale of Salinas ends up being. It could be as big or bigger than the Itinga area. So, we currently, I think, envision having 2. Do you foresee to begin with an underground operation and then an open pit? If anything, it would be the other way around. We're currently doing the trade-off studies and looking at being able to move enough throughput from an underground only scenario. There's a few reasons for it. A lot of it is around the less displacement of rock, easier to target high-grade mineralization with less dilution, and certainly avoid some of the higher strip ratios that you could end up with in an area like this, and creating bigger footprints, which also helps us move permit timelines forward as quickly as possible. But there is a scenario where we could do open pit early, and then look to transition to underground after that. We'll see how some of these other showings continue to develop. And I'm speaking primarily on Bandera and Utralado right now. We're still looking at Salinas in a lot of ways, but yeah, I think for now, if it was anything, it would be the reverse. We might look at a small starter pit and then transition underground. When do you expect to list on the NASDAQ? So we are looking at this. Certainly, we feel like there's an opportunity here to increase volume and tap into a larger market. There are pricing thresholds. You need $2 US for 90 days or $3 US for 5 days. It's one of the last hurdles we need to get through, and I think we're going to get through it organically. At that point, I think we're going to look at that opportunity and move to that opportunity and try to tap into to a larger market. So we're certainly eager to do that. I think we've had a lot of interest from groups outside of Canada and focused in the US and Europe that can't do venture projects. So timeline, that's a broad answer that doesn't help, but that is the last threshold that we need to get through. And I think with our upcoming catalysts, we'll blow through those pricing thresholds and be able to list. What was the rationale behind the acquisition of the Salinas project? Yeah, I mean, when we bought Neolit, which was the company that ultimately had these projects, we were starting to see what Latin Resources was doing next door, the scale and opportunity of the project they were developing. We see Salinas as another area that has huge opportunity. Not everywhere in the pegmatite belt has spodumene-rich pegmatite potential. Salinas is one of the areas that does, and when we look at it, I think there's a real potential for it to be as big or bigger even than the Itinga area. And so you only figure that out through drilling, which we're working on now. But we looked at it as something we couldn't possibly walk away from. And in the end, I think we're going to be able to outline something that is worth multiples of what we ended up paying for it. So we're very excited. When do you expect to release the mineral resource estimate on Salinas project? What is your target for the mineral resource estimate for that area, drilling over 20,000 meters? So we will have our initial phase, or sort of our initial resource on Salinas as part of that Q3 resource update. We're with the 20,000 meters of drilling, we're hoping for somewhere between 10 and 20 million tons. It's a brand new showing. We're just getting started. I know the expectations are high, and we certainly think we've been good at delivering. But that's where I think you should expect a resource to be, is in that sort of initial phase. So that's it for me for time, and thank you very much for everybody who joined.